What's up YouTube, Zazubaar here, and welcome to another edition of Zmmr. Universal Studios is well known for bringing some of the most classic movie monsters to life on the big screen, really shaping how we look at a lot of these monsters today, like Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy. Although all three of these monsters had either an established lore or legend, or films made in the silent era, the way Universal portrayed them is the way people today think of if you bring up one of these monsters in a conversation. Universal made a lot of classic monster movies throughout the 30s and 40s, many of them being sequels to the films I mentioned above. However, one monster in its film really stole the show in the 40s when his original film was released, being in the same high-class monster league as Dracula and the Frankenstein monster. I'm of course talking about none other than the Wolfman, whose first film was released in 1941. The Wolfman is an absolute classic, having classic dialogue, settings, monster designs, and of course actor, with this being the movie that really made Lon Chaney Jr. a horror legend. However, it was not the first werewolf movie, surprisingly. In fact, not even Universal's first. There were a few werewolf movies made in the silent era, and before The Wolfman, Universal made the much inferior film Werewolf of London, which I'll get to eventually. Werewolf of London was a financial flop, so obviously it isn't considered in the same class as Dracula or Frankenstein. However, The Wolfman, on the other hand, was a financial success when it was released in 1941. Being equally as chilling and classic as Universal's earlier films. The Wolfman established a lot of things about modern conceptions of werewolves that many people think was always part of werewolf lore. For one, silver being the only thing that can kill a werewolf. Silver was actually a way to kill vampires in early literature. Also, a pentagram being the symbol of the beast, which in mythology was the symbol of Satan in the occult. However, perhaps the biggest thing is what a werewolf looks like. In lore, they were always described and drawn as just men that turned into big wolves. But this film, and Werewolf of London kind of, made them more into hybrids of men and wolves. The Wolfman stands up on two legs, and has the overall figure of a hunched-over man. However, he has the paws, claws, hair, and face of a wolf. This werewolf design is the work of makeup master Jack Pierce, who also designed the look of the Frankenstein monster and the Mummy in their respective Universal films. But I'll get more into that in a bit. Some last background details I want to mention are that this film also stars established horror star Claude Rains as the Wolfman's father, Lord Talbot. Rains is probably best known for playing the Invisible Man in the 1933 film of the same title. Also, that this film never states that Larry Talbot becomes the Wolfman because of the full moon, only when the Wolfbane is in bloom. It was actually the sequel that established the full moon as the transformation factor. With these things said, let's talk about the Wolfman's plot. It's rather basic, but has some great elements to it. Lon Chaney Jr. plays Lawrence, or Larry for short, Talbot, son of an English lord and heir to his family estate. His brother has recently died in a hunting accident, meaning he's the only one left to inherit the estate and must prepare to do so. He meets a young girl named Gwen in the nearby village who tells him the legend of the werewolf. Larry isn't very interested in it, since he's more interested in hitting on her. Larry seems to force her to go out with him, and throughout the beginning of the film is told the legend of the werewolf by several others, including his father. Turns out they can apparently see into the near future, since Larry is attacked by a gypsy werewolf named Bela, appropriately played by Bela Lugosi. Larry kills him with a silver-headed cane he bought from Gwen, but not before the beast kills one of Gwen's friends. Larry wakes up the next morning with his father, doctor, and other unnamed or unimportant people around him, surprisingly healed and confused about whether or not he killed a man or a wolf last night. Since the body that was found where Larry claimed to kill the wolf was obviously Bella's human one. His doctor and father believe Larry to be going crazy when he says it was a wolf and defends that. Bella's mother, Maliva, tells Larry that her son was a werewolf, and now he's going to become a werewolf due to the now pentagram-shaped scar in his chest showing where he was bit. Turns out all those legends Larry dismissed were true when he turns into the Wolfman for the first time that very night. The Wolfman kills a gravedigger that night, and just as quickly as he killed him, returns to the estate and turns back into Larry. His father and doctor now have more reason to think he's crazy due to Larry's paranoia about being dangerous towards Gwen, who he thinks is his next victim. Lord Talbot tries to convince Larry that he's going nuts by tying him up to his room and making sure there's no way he can get out. Stupidly, he leaves Larry unattended and leaves the room, and of course, Larry escapes after turning into tall, dark, and hairy. The Wolfman goes straight for Gwen and does almost kill her, but Lord Talbot quickly rushes in and beats the hell out of the Wolfman with Larry's silver-headed cane. The Wolfman collapses and turns back into Larry. Lord Talbot mourns over his son's body. Maliva does a prayer over Larry's body, and the end credits roll. The Wolfman excels at several different things that make it a really good monster movie. For one, all the sets are really creepy and atmospheric, really sucking you into this village that, as Lord Talbot says, hasn't changed much in 300 years. The forest where all the killings happen and the gypsies have their camp is always filled with fog that goes up to everyone's shins and has very scary looking trees that almost look like they could reach out and grab you. Anyone else thinking Evil Dead? Anyway, so the Wolfman has some of the best atmosphere of all the Universal movies, which the music can also be given credit for. The soundtrack is one of the most awesome of any monster movie I've ever seen. It's creepy, romantic, and epic all at the same time, and gives the film and its sequels much of their feel and presence. The Wolfman also has engaging and fun to watch human characters, which in my book is always a point of pride for monster movies to have. Claude Rains and Lon Chaney Jr. have a great father-son dynamic, and Chaney really is brilliant here as the increasingly more insane Larry and the fearsome Wolfman. Bela Lugosi has a super small role, and even his character is memorable. We get everything we need from his character in the about 5 minutes we see him on screen, not counting his werewolf transformation. His character is a prelude to how Larry's going to be later in the film, a tortured soul destined to kill with no control over who and when it is he kills. Which is greatly demonstrated when he tries to tell Gwen's friend Jenny future, and all he sees is the pentagram that marks a werewolf and his victims. It horrifies her, and all he can tell her is to run. It's very effective, and is also a demonstration that Lugosi doesn't always have to play the creepy Dracula or mad scientist, which he became famous, or in some cases infamous for. The Wolfman is my favorite type of monster. Larry is just a normal human being who just blends in with the normal everyday crowd, but he's got a horrible thing inside of him just aching to burst out and unleash the savagery that we all feel. Larry doesn't want to be the Wolfman. It's a curse in every sense of the word. He can't control when he becomes the Wolfman or what he does in those hours of savagery. And then, when he turns back into the guy who blends in, he has to deal with the knowledge of what he has done in the night. That, to me, is the scariest kind of monster, something that you can't control or even see. Larry doesn't know what the thing even looks like and admits to his father that this is what most scares him in this scene.
I can figure out most anything if you give me electric current and tubes and wires, but something I do with my hands, but these things you can't even touch.
Imagine waking up every morning of your life in torn clothes and barefoot, wondering who you may have killed last night by tearing them apart. I'm sure it would torture you, because you're a good person with morals, possibly religion, and just trying to be a decent person in daily life. As Larry's father puts it, lycanthropy is a technical expression for something very simple: the good and evil in every man's soul. As much as we'd like to think that we're all good people and never give a second thought as to the sincerity of our thoughts and actions, we unfortunately all have moments of selfishness or immoral thoughts, like wanting to tear someone apart who angers you. Larry represents the everyman who has to deal with the conflict of distinguishing what is right and what is wrong. But he has trouble doing this and tends to instead run away from these dilemmas instead of standing up to them and making a final judgment. He apparently ran away from home in his teens to America and had been moving around the country taking various jobs, never settling in one place, never making a final decision or judgment. From what we're told about his past, Larry was the younger brother of his family, and his brother John Talbot was promised inheriting the estate and prowess of Lord Talbot. Being angered or abandoned perhaps by his father, he ran away from the issue, never really trying to prove he was worthy of becoming Lord Talbot, never once making a judgment or distinguishing right from wrong. So, he's cursed to unwillingly let out the evil inside of him and immortally live with it. He can't change because lycanthropy is an immortal curse, and he's going to walk the earth forever, being forced to kill and do evil things. The Wolfman is a somewhat surprisingly complex film in this regard, and this puts it a cut above other monster movies that don't do much but shock you with monsters either ripping people apart or fighting. Watching the movie, it should come as no surprise that originally there wasn't supposed to be any shown physical werewolf. The movie was supposed to leave it up to the audience to decide whether or not Larry was crazy, thinking that when the wolfbane's in bloom, he becomes a murderous beast. However, at some points the film does feel a little pretentious, and that we're supposed to feel the torture with Larry, yet we don't really know him too well. We get little to no background on him except for a few minutes of exposition at the beginning from his father. It's not a huge issue, since we do get examples in the film of why he's tortured, and of Larry's problems that I addressed a minute ago. The film is a really clever and effective allegory for the good and bad in all of us, and what happens when we don't address that we have issues confronting the good and bad in us. Although it's debatable whether or not this will result in you becoming a werewolf. As I said earlier, the design of the Wolfman by Jack Pierce is masterful and classic. It's my favorite werewolf design ever shown on film. It's undeniably a werewolf, but the Wolfman is undeniably his own beast and not just another werewolf. Since earlier when Bella turned into the beast, it was more or less a regular wolf. The Jack Pierce Wolfman has gone down in history as the most famous werewolf look, and whenever you see someone spoof or make reference to the classic Universal monsters, the Wolfman usually looks similar to Jack Pierce's design. One possible downside to the Wolfman, though, is there isn't really a transformation scene, or at least a good one. All we see is a stop-motion effect of Larry's feet becoming hairier and more wolf-like, and then bam, he's the Wolfman. Wow, impressive. It wasn't until Frankenstein meets the Wolfman that we got a really good, effective transformation scene, but it doesn't really hurt the movie for me. As I said, the music really gives the film a lot of its atmosphere and epicness during the scenes where Larry's the Wolfman. In fact, it's so good that the soundtrack from the Wolfman has been recycled for use in almost every film following it, and even in King Kong vs. Godzilla. I loved it. Whenever I hear it, I see Chaney as the Wolfman chasing Gwen through those awesome foggy forest sets. The sets are another part of this movie that are freaking awesome. They're creepy, engaging, and the town, forest, and castle almost become their own characters. I could go on about how creepy this movie is and how classic it is, but honestly, I've already said it or somebody else has. So let's wrap this up. The Wolfman is one of the best of the classic Universal monster films. In my opinion, the best, but universally undeniably one of the greatest chilling monster films of all time. It's got amazing atmosphere, music, makeup, is a lot more complex than other monster movies like it, and has human characters who aren't completely boring. However, it does have its problems like the practically non-existent transformation scenes, main character who at some points it feels like we should know him better or feel for him more than we do, but again, an absolute classic. So the lowest I can possibly give The Wolfman is a 4 out of 5. If you're a monster movie fan and haven't seen this movie, what are you waiting for? A remake? Oh. Yeah. See the original. Sorry this review took so long to be posted, but I've had a very busy and difficult past couple of weeks, so hopefully my review of The Wolfman lived up to all your expectations. I promise episodes of Zmmr will be posted back on schedule for the next few episodes, definitely, and I'm sure you're all wondering what will be next on Zmmr. Well, I haven't really done a recent monster movie yet, so how's about, on the next Zmmr, Cloverfield. See you then, Zazubaar out.